Josh Reynolds is a big addition to the Denver Broncos wide receiver room, including a potential boost to the Broncos offense in 2024. We'll tell you why on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get Locked on Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button down below so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long. I'm Cody Roark. I cover the Broncos as a reporter for Mile High Sports. Joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. And look, over the weekend, I had a little bit of vacation. It was nice to get away a little bit. Sayre nailed it with his Monday mock draft here on Locked on Broncos. So in case you missed that, make sure you go check out yesterday's episode of the show. Some news, though, that we haven't had a chance to really address here on the podcast. It's a few days old here, but we can still talk about the impact of it. Josh Reynolds' addition to the wide receiver room happened last week when I was in New York. And tell you what, I really like this move here, Sayre. I think it was a great addition for Denver, for their offense, what they can be, and it gives you a little bit more security, I think, when you look at the depth of the position in and of itself, considering the team's departure from Jerry Jeudy this offseason. Haven't had a chance to talk to you about it, but Sayre, I mean, really, what were your thoughts on Denver adding Josh Reynolds to the mix? Me, I really liked it.
Yeah, I love this move for the Denver Broncos. I really do, Cody. I mean, when Josh Reynolds was acquired by the Detroit Lions, it was really a godsend for Jared Goff. And you could go back and you can look at his pre-Josh Reynolds numbers. They were teammates with the Rams. So people need to remember that Josh Reynolds played well enough with the Rams, got a free agent deal with the Titans, and kind of flamed out with the Titans, was put on waivers, was claimed mid-season by Detroit. And not to be so hyperbolic or anything, but I actually did an article on this at the time because it was pretty staggering when Jared Goff had a bit of a turnaround there in Detroit. The before and after with Josh Reynolds was kind of crazy. He became a security blanket for Jared Goff and just improved year over year, every year that he was with Detroit. So I love this move for the Broncos. I don't want to overhype and say, well, he could be the number 2 target in the passing. I don't think he needs to be that. I think as a third or fourth option at receiver, it doesn't get much better than Josh Reynolds in today's NFL. The Broncos getting him for a bargain at 2 years, $9 million, with the incentives potentially to get up to $14 million on this deal. So a very team-friendly contract, a player who's been improving. He's 29 years old, so this is a rare instance this offseason where the Broncos have gotten older in terms of replacing somebody, but he's 6'3". He's got good hands. Cody, he's somebody who he's had a number of touchdowns over the last handful of years, 8 touchdowns. So he's somebody who can win in the red zone. He can win as a slot. He can play the outside. I think this is a very good move by Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos.
Well, and on top of that, look, I think you're also adding a guy I think is a great insurance policy in the event. Look, I think if Courtland Sutton and Tim Patrick, both these guys are fully healthy, that's great news for the Broncos. Then you factor in Marvin Mims, where he's at, a more prominent featured role according to Sean Payton this upcoming season. And then you throw a guy like Reynolds into the mix who does have experience. I feel like that has been an issue that Denver has had at receiver when they've had guys go down. They haven't had a lot of great guys with tons of experience. I mean, you look at Reynolds, he has the experience. He has the playmaking production. Heck, the Broncos, so I'm hauling 2 catches, I think, for 40-something yards against them in the blowout game that they had, unfortunately, that we had to watch on the NFL Network on Saturday Night Football last year. Denver got an up-close view at what he can do. But not only that, he's going to be a possession guy. He's going to be a great chain mover, like a great option, in my opinion, on third down, especially if other teams are trying to take away Courtland, if they're trying to take away Tim. If Marvin becomes a focal point and can utilize his speed to get behind defenses, teams are going to account for that. You know what that leaves? Josh Reynolds, deep crossing routes, right? Some people are saying, well, he's going to play the Jerry Jeudy role a little bit. I think Marvin's going to play that role, and I think you're going to see guys kind of mix and match at different roles. That's something that Sean wants these receivers to do. He doesn't want them to just specialize at X or Z. He wants them to be able to know all the roles inside of his offense. So that's where I think Josh Reynolds can come in and have an impact. Not only that, you're getting a guy who is a willing blocker in the run game, a guy who's willing to get his hands dirty, isn't afraid of contact, and helps open things up on the perimeter if you do have some outside runs. So I think you are getting a little bit of a boost there. And as you mentioned, we're not going to overhype and say this is the move that's going to take the Broncos to the Super Bowl, but this is a really good get for a team that I felt like Sayre, like going into the NFL draft, you and I have had several mocks where we've said, okay, hey, Denver should maybe add a wide receiver here. Maybe they add one here in the draft, but I don't think they're going to add as many as maybe they possibly could have. Now that they add Reynolds into the mix, you look at that, I think that's a really solidified top 4, top 5 group that they have right now inside of their own roster. I'm not saying in the NFL. I'm saying when you look at the top 1 through 5 wide receivers on this team, that's a pretty solid group for whoever's going to be the quarterback this year.
Not bad at all. And speaking of making the quarterback better, how about Josh Reynolds last year? 113.3 QB rating when targeted. The year before that, 99.5. So it wasn't like it was a huge outlier or anything like that. He's been making the quarterbacks better. 78 catches over the last 2 seasons, 57 for first downs, 8 touchdowns over the last 2 years. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy who adds value. I think there's a lot of Broncos country out there. It's been a little bit cynical about this move, Cody, the interactions that I've been having. And I get it. I mean, it's Josh Reynolds. He was the 4th option or whatever in Detroit. And it's not like he's this game-breaking receiver. And we're not trying to overhype it as such. But at the same time, what are the Broncos? It feels like over time, this slowly assembled free agent class, it really feels like the Broncos are just raising the floor of the roster at a number of different spots. Had a good offensive line last year. You're raising the floor on the D line by adding Malcolm Roach. You're raising the floor at linebacker with Cody Barton. You're doing all these different things. And now you add Josh Reynolds, a much needed, like you said, veteran presence who can block. And I don't think this has any necessarily bearing on Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Cody. You know that a lot of people are wondering because, well, he's another 6'3" receiver, totally different skill set than those 2 guys. Those guys are big bodies who play the outside and they win vertically down the field or in contested catch situations. Josh Reynolds is more of the smooth operator type who runs good routes. He's shifty. He's got some nice acceleration. He's fast. So I think there's a lot of different things that he brings to the table. A much thinner frame than somebody like Courtland Sutton or Tim Patrick, and he's a completely different type of receiver. So it does add some differentiation to the position as well, where you got big bodies, then you got the smaller, speedy guy in Marvin Mims. Now you've got a guy like Josh Reynolds who, like you said, he can do a little bit of everything for you.
Well, I think when I watch him play and you go back and you watch his tape, he reminds me from a play style standpoint. He reminds me a lot of Tim Patrick. I'm not saying the 60-40 jump ball stuff. I'm talking about you need a first down. He's going to come up with a catch. Now, I know that there's some criticism that is going his way. He had a couple of bad drops against the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, look, that happens. But if we're going to focus on that and ignore the whole body of work, then what are we even doing this here for, right? Like, he's a player that the Broncos feel like can add value to a position where they feel like they need it. Like, they have a lot of wide receivers right now inside that room with a lot of different skill sets. But right now on paper, it does seem like Courtland, Tim, Marvin, and Josh Reynolds, those top 4 right there are a lock for the roster going into 2024. So now what might they do going forward? That's a great question. But we also have to ask ourselves this question too, as we all love the game of football. The NFL is changing the game, and in a way that isn't necessarily great for the outcome and the future perspective of, especially with some of the new rules. We're going to dive into the hip drop rule and how the new kickoff rule could benefit a guy like Marvin Mims. You're going to get that on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and a lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. I've utilized BetterHelp therapy in the past. I needed help trying to figure out how to deal with anxiety, stress, time management, being able to do all the things I need to do in a day, but still have time for myself. And that's where BetterHelp connected me with a therapist that I vibed really well with. I was matched to within minutes. And then I had and scheduled my first session from the convenience of my own home. And that's the one thing I like about it. You can do it anywhere and everywhere that is comfortable for you. You don't have to go sit in a waiting room. You can just sit in the comfort of your own bed. You can sit at your desk at your house and sit on your couch. That's one thing I like about BetterHelp. And if you don't vibe well with your therapist, you can change therapists at any time at no additional cost to yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and best of all, suited to your schedule and to your needs. All you do is you fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapists, like I said, at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
The NFL continues to make life difficult for defensive players, but are they bringing kickoffs back from the dead in 2024? Cody and I are going to talk about some of the latest rule changes from the NFL and how they may benefit the Denver Broncos, because that's what it's all about. We need the Broncos to be able to benefit from whatever the NFL is doing. In Broncos Country, we appreciate every single one of you for tuning in every single day to Locked On Broncos, wherever and however you get your podcasts, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And if you subscribe to the show on YouTube as well, shout out to all of you watching the show and not just listening. We appreciate every single one of you for rocking with us all off season long as the Broncos. Now, Cody, we have a lot on the radar. Uniforms coming up here in the near future. The NFL draft is obviously very big here in the month of April. So we're going to be seeing probably the Broncos add at least one or two new quarterbacks to this roster. A big offseason ahead. So you want to tune in every single day to the show. Let's talk about these rule changes from the NFL, because let's start with the bad news first, right? Because the hip drop tackle, it's a term that makes me, it's kind of like nails on the chalkboard, Cody. When I hear this, the hip drop tackle, it's hard to fathom. In maybe the craziest aspect about this rule change is that it was unanimous from the ownership. It was unanimously passed. Life just continues to get tougher and tougher for defensive players in today's NFL.
No, it is. And look, the game has been trending this way. I caught a bunch of flack because I said it, around the NFL Pro Bowl time. I posted a tweet, said, hey, like, pay attention in the next 10 years. Like, there's a reason the NFL is utilizing this as a flag football feature. There's a reason why they're investing in flag football. It is heading toward that. And there's going to be people like, no, they make so much money. You don't believe that if they can keep premier names like Patrick Mahomes healthy and upright, where he's not getting hit, not getting tackled, they're scoring points, that there's still not a market for it. There still is going to be a market for it. That's why players are going to be eligible to play in the Olympics. The NFL is supporting it, which normally they wouldn't. Teams would be like, no, like, you can't even go play pickup basketball. You're going to go play flag football. Like, to me, the hip drop tackle is making it to where, okay, all of a sudden now, what does the NFL want, Sayre? They want more points. They want games where you're going to see big plays. You're going to see a lot of scoring. But the reality of the situation is when you talk about the physics of the game, and I want to make this very, 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 very clear. And because I get people tell me all the time, well, rugby's adopted this. Football's not rugby, right? There's similar things to it. It's not the same exact thing when you talk about having shoulder pads and a helmet versus bodies, where they are being a lot safer at the rugby level to do it. Well, they eliminated the hip drop by doing this. It's a different game, okay? Hey, let's take a look. Jaquan McMillan against Derrick Henry. What is Jaquan McMillan going to do in a one-on-one open field? He's going to shoot low. He's going to try to wrap up the legs. Then what's going to happen? How do you bring a guy like Derrick Henry down? This whole idea where the NFL created this buzzword, hip drop, as if all of a sudden they're coached up, they're grabbing, and then they're just violently dropping their hips to hurt players. That's not how it is. It's a tackle. That's the thing that just drives me nuts. And look, I talked to players. I texted a couple of Broncos players, defensive players, some guys that used to play in Denver that now, around the league. I asked them, I said, what do you think about this? And they said, this is the dumbest term ever, because the NFL is coming out and they're pretty much making it sound like this was something that is taught, that players are taught, this hip drop, and that it's a technique that they're actively working on. No, it's an instinctual thing. You want to know why? Because defensive players' jobs is to prevent the offense from getting a first down, is prevent them from scoring, right? And you see some of the clips that the NFL put out that they've circulated through Tom Pelissero saying this is what they're trying to ban. A lot of those tackles were tackles. Like, that's the thing. And all of a sudden, everyone's going to look at Logan Wilson versus Mark Andrews. Sayre, what is Logan Wilson supposed to do in that situation? He's trying to stop Mark Andrews from getting a first down and also preventing him from scoring a touchdown. And all of a sudden, now that's going to be penalized. We don't even know in today's NFL what the hell a damn catch is. And that's been a years-long debate here. So now you're adding another wrinkle where NFL refs are already bad enough as is. To me, this is frustrating. You can no longer play defense in today's NFL. And look, a lot of defensive players are not happy about this rule, and rightfully so.
You go high, you're going to get a flag called. You go low, you're going to get a flag thrown. I mean, you try to tackle a guy, like you said, and bring him down and prevent him from going forward any further, you're going to get a flag call. What I can't stand. And fine. You're going to get a fine as well. Yeah, you're right. And Cody, to me, the most annoying part about this is that offensive players now, they're going to probably start working on their flopping a little bit. And, if you can sell an injury right at the very back end of a play, if you can sell that you might even be a fraction of a bit hurt, you might be able to draw a flag and help your team. So there's going to be ramifications of this that, like you said, over time, you get to, if you want to get to the point of flag football eventually, then you're starting to eliminate guys that excel at creating yardage after contact. You're eliminating the big Tyreek Hill, catch and runs for 85 yards because somebody rips a flag off. Like, you're watering down the game in such a way that it's like these guys realize they're playing football. I mean, it's a contact sport. Like, it's not that you want guys to get injured, but there's just certain things that you can't just slap a term on something and make it a thing. That's the most frustrating thing to me from the NFL. It's like the hip drop tackle, as far as I've been concerned, Cody, that's just a tackle, like you said. So it's very frustrating from the league to be trending in this direction. And I don't know how it's going to go over. I don't know how it's going to be policed. That's going to be the thing that's worth watching, is like, every year it's like the NFL is putting an emphasis on this. And it's like, is this year it's going to be the hip drop tackle? We see it penalized all the time, or are they going to penalize it over the top in the preseason and then kind of just gauge the reaction of the fans based on that? I don't know exactly what they're going to do or what they're going to coach up the officials to do, but it's going to be fascinating one way or the other. But how about this kickoff rule? I mean, in the good news side of things, we got rid of the bad news there. Good news is the kickoff return seems to be coming back to the NFL, Cody. You kind of have to see this one in order to adequately know exactly what it looks like. But essentially, the kickoff return is going to happen with the coverage unit already downfield. It's going to eliminate essentially these guys getting hit at full speed, 21, 22 miles per hour, and it's going to kind of slow down the pursuit. But I think it's a huge advantage for the kickoff returner, which has been almost like a fullback in the NFL today. It's almost extinct. I kind of like this new twist that they're putting on the kickoff returns.
No, I do as well. And I think for a guy like Marvin Mims, like Sean Payton even kind of grinned and laughed about it at the NFL annual meeting last week, saying like, hey, it's a good thing that we got a guy like Mims. And look, last year Mims was the most electrifying returner, one of the most electrifying returners in the game, and obviously got a Pro Bowl nomination because of it. But you look at how the design set up now. Obviously, it's weird because I was watching some of the new UFL, right? The old XFL and the USFL combining to make the UFL. They went back to a different style of kickoff. Like, they went to normal NFL style, but they backed the kicker up so you're not running into touchbacks and guys are still running down full speed. This new model you're going to see this year in the NFL, guys are going to be at least 10 yards apart from one another or 5 yards apart, and it's going to be kicked. The ball is going to be kicked, and it has to land at what they have in terms of the landing zone. The landing zone is anywhere from the 20 to the 1 yard line. Like, you have to kick it there. Now, if you kick it and it goes into the back of the end zone, if the ball's at 20, if it hits the landing zone and rolls into the end zone, that's where it goes. It goes to the 20-yard line. If the ball doesn't reach the landing zone, the ball goes to the 40-yard line. And if you kick the ball out of bounds and it goes out of the end zone, it'll be placed at the 35-yard line. So teams are essentially going to be rewarded with really good starting field position if, in fact, teams try to opt to kick a touchback or try to do it. They want to keep the return aspect into the game. And it was a little confusing the way I just read it. So forgive me, Broncos country, if I butchered it. But what it does, I think it allows an opportunity for teams to have safer options on kickoff because it's a dangerous full speed play. I tore my ACL on kickoff running down full speed and trying to make a play, trying to plant. They've eliminated over the years the wedge buster opportunity, right? Where you can just create a wedge and try to bury guys and open things up with your return option. But now it's, hey, we're going to be creative. You can allow guys to engage in contact without running full speed at each other downfield. And now it's going to really design, like, you're going to have to really focus on winning your one-on-one. So, Sayre, to me, this is a great opportunity for guys to develop even further on special teams and start to see, like, kickoff was just a wasted play in football, right? Because last year, sitting in the press box at Denver, every team's kicking it off. It's like, oh, touchback. There's a waste of 45 seconds right there. That between that and then you go straight into a TV timeout. Let's figure out how to keep it in the game. Now the stakes are higher. It's a little more exciting. And we want to hear from you, Broncos country. What do you think about the hip drop tackle rules and also the new kickoff rules and maybe how it impacts Marvin Mims and the Denver Broncos? Make sure you let us know if you're watching or listening to Lockdown Broncos, wherever you get your podcast. But as Sayre pointed out, the month of April is here, and you know what that means. The NFL draft is here, and this week, the Denver Broncos have begun their draft meetings. We'll take a look at where their final big board is being set. What might they be looking for? What do the tea leaves tell us about the direction? You're going to get that much more in today's brand new episode, Lockdown Broncos. Today's Lockdown Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know it, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action because right now, new customers who sign up, they get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So if you sign up as a brand new customer at FanDuel here today, you place a $5 bet and that bet wins, you're automatically going to get $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 that you can use to bet on the tournament, the MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Sayre, big week here for the Denver Broncos as they really start to put the finishing touches on some things ahead of the NFL draft. We know that George Payton, Sean Payton, Darren Muji, the contingent of the Broncos scouting department, they've been busy going to various pro days all across the college football atmosphere, including last week at Drake May, a large contingent at Drake May's pro day here. Now they're beginning their draft meetings this week. All the intel, all the notes that they've gathered from attending these pro days, hosting private workouts, it all accumulates now to where they're going to sit down. They're going to talk about prospects, and they're going to move players up their big board. They're going to move players down their big board. This is the roster building season, man. This is a big time here for Denver.
It is. And I think now is the time of year when you really want to kind of start paying attention to people who have inside access to teams or people who have connections to general managers or coaches around the league. Typically are right about those guys like Peter Schrager, people like Daniel Jeremiah, people with actual connections in the scouting and executive world. This is now the time of year when you really want to start paying attention to what those guys are saying because they're not necessarily spreading misinformation about what teams think of certain prospects. Now, teams aren't always going to give you everything. The message that's going to be out there is what they want out there. So you're going to have to decide what to do with that. But I think that aspect of this is going to be fascinating because teams are finalizing their boards here in the early portion of April. It's not like you're going to get all the way to the NFL draft and teams are still debating, hey, do we like this guy or this guy? That stuff is going to be finalized and kind of set in stone so you can have a plan for, well, what happens if they go – mock drafts are going to be happening in front offices and teams are going to be going through scenarios like what happens if these 11 teams take these guys? What do we do here? What if we want to trade down? What scenarios do we have here? You want to be able to put those kinds of plans in place and not necessarily be debating, well, we don't necessarily agree about prospect A and prospect B. They're finalizing all that stuff, Cody, and the Broncos have been on the pro day circuit. Some interesting names that they've been out there looking at. Marvin Mims, the offensive tackle from Georgia. So amidst all the quarterback rumors, then you have things about the offensive tackle position now coming into focus for the Broncos as well. Could be a very, very heated month of April amongst Broncos country in terms of what do we make of all these different rumors that are coming out.
Well, I think when we look at quarterback specifically, you look at Peter Schrager, he's got connections to Sean Payton because they worked obviously at Fox together in Payton's 1 year that he did the media tour there. Obviously, we know George Payton well connected to Tom Pelissero in comparison to other guys there, Mike Garafolo. Those two guys you probably have to keep a name on. Adam Schefter's got really good ties as well, I think, to George Payton and obviously the Broncos for us. But I also think Adam has a little bit more of an allegiance to I think, Sean at this point and where things are at. So I'm very curious to see where the rumblings suggest Denver is going to go. But I also think we're also setting ourselves up for an ideal situation here in the NFL draft, Sayre, where remember in 2021, the whole idea was quarterback. And then Broncos fans, when the pick was announced, they're like, wait a minute, that's not, did he say cornerback or quarterback, right? They went Pat Surtain. They went the cornerback route there rather than the quarterback position. Could we maybe be seeing the Broncos put themselves in another position here, whether they move up? If they move up, I think it's quarterback. If they stay put, I think there's a chance they could maybe choose best player available if the quarterback they don't like is not there or they don't want to give up the capital necessary to move up and go get that guy. I could very well see a situation brewing here where Denver takes the BPA, and that could be an offensive tackle. That could be an edge rusher, though I don't think those moves would necessarily be the most favorable here going forward in the eyes of Broncos country, who really wants the quarterback position addressed.
You want to kill that need with fire, right? I mean, you obviously don't want to go into the NFL draft or come out of night one of the NFL draft still asking the question, like, who's going to be the quarterback of this team going forward. Are we serious about Jarrett Stidham? Are we going to seriously go after one of the guys that's left in a free agency pool that's been picked over seemingly by every other team in the league? Like, that is going to be fascinating to see, Cody, if the fan base has to react to something like that. So I'm really pumped to see what comes out in these next couple weeks, because like all those guys that you mentioned, they're going to be leaking things about players, not necessarily about, hey, the Broncos really like this guy. They're going to be leaking stuff that they're hearing about players from within these organizations that you're going to have to connect the dots. And us here on Locked On Broncos, we're going to have to connect the dots and say, hey, maybe they're talking about Sean Payton and the Broncos here because, X, Y, or Z. So that's why you want to stay locked in and pay attention now, because these boards are going to be set, and the Broncos have been good about not leaking things, Cody. But I think historically, we do typically find out about a little behind the scenes of what Sean Payton likes in terms of the draft process. We've heard the Mahomes story. We've heard that he liked Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. We've heard that he liked Mac Jones. Stuff like that does eventually come to light. So it's going to be fascinating to see those people that have connections to him and this front office, what they say about the Broncos leading up to the draft.
Well, Broncos Country, make sure you buckle up, because Sayre and myself, we're going to have you covered every step of the way here in the Lockdown Broncos podcast. We're going to take a look at some other things as well, including if the Broncos are maybe looking to trade on draft day to move up, what might that look like? What in-house players on the roster could they also take a look at? We'll debate that and much more on tomorrow's brand new episode, Lockdown Broncos.